Right then, hello. I decided to buy a shredder. I had to shell out €12 for a used one. And here's my newly acquired second-hand contraption. A product made by a company called Genie, the Genie 250 CD. I'll first explain the functions of the slide switch. Well, the switch position, off, goes without saying. In the auto position, nothing happens at first. The shredder only starts after the paper has been inserted. When the paper has been shredded, it switches off automatically. The shredder can be started manually, by pressing the clear button. In the reverse position, CDs and check cards can be shredded. The shredder runs backwards in continuous operation and doesn't switch off automatically. Alright, then let's go and test how powerful the shredder can work. Now we're in a fine mess. I've done 3 lots of shredding and now there's not a peep from the shredder. And there's no point pressing the clear button as it isn't working either. Let's have a closer eye. The best way is from underneath. Ooh. Paper jam. I'm removing any scraps of paper. Inside the shredder, there are bound to be a few scraps. First, I'll unplug the shredder, open the casing and see what it looks like inside. Oh my god. My goodness gracious me. The inside of the casing is all bunged up with scraps of paper, and it's sticky too. It doesn't look much better under the lid either. To reduce friction, the manufacturer used a special lubricant, an adhesive grease. This is to stop the lubricant dripping down. The downside, however, is that scraps of paper and other rubbish also stick to the grease. If the waste box is full, the scraps of paper wrap themselves around the cutting rollers and get stuck. This goes well for a while, until everything gets bunged up and the shredder gets blocked. Due to the way it's put together, you can't get rid of all the bits. To do this, you'd need to remove the mechanical part completely. You can now get into the lower and upper parts easily and the housing case can be cleaned. Once I've finished the work on the housing case, I can look at the mechanical part more closely. This component also needs to be completely taken apart. So that we can clearly see what a smallest unit is. I'll go through the individual parts as follows. Cutter wheel. Spacer sleeve white. Spacer sleeve black. Head or end sleeve. Cog wheel. Bevel. Hexagonal rod. Grid. Bearing races without inserts. Inserts. Bearing shells complete. The picture shows 3 cutting rollers complete, with the necessary individual parts. 2 large cutting rollers at the top for shredding paper. And below a smaller one, for CDs and credit cards. I did a retrospective edit on how I've depicted the cutting rollers. This is how it should look. Unfortunately, the reality is a little bit different. The adhesive grease is still on the small cutting roller. It doesn't look any better on the 2 large rollers, either. Some textile threads are still hanging down. I am therefore dismantling the 3 cutting rollers as far as you can. I don't think much of some videos on the internet, like how to oil a paper shredder. I assume that even a technical layman will understand. If you put oil into the shredder slot, the oil never gets to the places where it should. Friction occurs mainly on the right and left cog wheels, and on the bearing races. In my opinion, oiling the shredder as shown in the video makes little sense. I'll demonstrate that with the mechanical part to show what happens then. It's a safe bet the oily goo will run out of the cutting rollers at the bottom. Aha, and off we go, and it started the dripping. To be fair, I should say that the internet video is not specifically about the Genie CD250 model. However, the devices all work on the same principle. But like I said, that's just my opinion. If a manufacturer recommends something like that, so be it. I wouldn't do it that way. I will demonstrate later how to lubricate the places where friction occurs. All parts, black and white spaces, cutting wheels, cog wheels, grid, bearing races, etc. are cleaned. This is what it looks like when everything is disassembled and cleaned on the table. The cutting wheels, sleeves, hex rods, shine like new, and everything else spick and span. Now we can put it all back together. The animation which follows about assembly applies to the other 2 cutting rollers in the same way. I'm starting with the parts spacer, cutting wheels, and the hex rod. Well, the assembly with the scale worked. 2 more times, then the cutting rollers are okay again. I'm checking that the procedure for the cutting wheels and sleeves has been followed properly. Okay, that'll do. All cutting rollers are clean and free of grease again, and can be installed. Perfect. It's all very tight, and I notice that some lock washers are missing. Either they were never installed, or the parts got lost during cleaning. Now I have to find a supplier who will sell me 2 or 3 lock washers. Ah, here is one. Well, model dealers sometimes sell small quantities. The manufacturer, Genie, has soldered a plug connection on. I'm removing the soldered cables and replacing them with 2 cable lugs. And this is what a plug-in connection should actually look like. The mechanical part of the shredder is reassembled, and looks quite good. So, and now to the solution. How do I lubricate the necessary individual parts? All friction drive parts are lubricated with commercially available grease. This can be bearing grease for bicycles, or bearing grease for other purposes. I start with the head sleeves, which are still in a row next to each other, and are now under the bearing block. The head sleeves are placed on the hexagon rods, lubricated and then guided into the bearing block. It looks like this when all 3 cutting rollers are inserted in the bearing block. The bearing shells are in 2 parts. One part is metal, and the other is a plastic insert. The insert is placed on the metal part, and the grease is distributed in the lubricating groove. Now only the cog wheels and beaver need to be lubricated. I do this with the same lube, in the following way. Not too much, and not a bit. This applies to the beaver on the left, and the cog wheels on the right side. The bearing grease is later distributed to the cog wheels by rotation, when the casing is closed. Another tip for installing the bearing shells on the side where the CDs and credit cards are shredded. The installation at these points is a bit tricky. Trick number 1. Turn the bearing shell complete with a little force over the cutting wheel. If it doesn't work. Number 2. Place only one half of the insert on the bearing shell. Insert the bearing shell. Then slide the bearing shell and the insert into each other. The mechanical part is installed upside down in the upper part. Up here, where the connecting cables for the motor are, in normal operation is down. Fits, wobbles, and has air, says the expert. The assembly of the circuit board and the slide switch on the upper part should not be forgotten. So here it is again, the shredder without the lower case. Before I screw the lower case back on, a few words about some components. These are the components: microswitch, gear, shift lever, and the clear button. The clear button is not an electrical switch. It acts on the microswitch together with the shift lever. I modified the shift lever so that the microswitch triggers earlier. Here shows still the original version. And here the one I modified. There are two ways to start the shredder. Firstly, press the clear button. Secondly, insert paper. In the original version, there is a small gap between the lever and the microswitch. In the modified version, the microswitch triggers earlier due to the thickening. This is what the whole thing looks like in reality without engine noise. The screwdriver simulates the sheet of paper that starts the shredder. Here again in another view. It is no wonder that the microswitch can no longer be triggered in some cases. Any rubbish is blocking the shift lever, and thus the button of the microswitch. Even pressing the clear button can't do anything, because it's gridlocked. The next problem is when CDs are being shredded, but there are still scraps of paper between the cutting rollers. By reversing the direction of rotation, the scraps of paper are transported upwards. The shift lever can be blocked from the outside, and the shredder runs constantly in automatic mode. The shredder can only be stopped manually with the switch in the off position. And now on the topic of cog wheels and gearboxes. If a gear wheel is driven, it gets a direction of rotation. This simulation shows a counterclockwise rotation. If you add a second cog wheel, the direction of rotation of the second changes to clockwise. If a third cog wheel is added, the direction of rotation is the same as that of the first, counterclockwise. The shredding of papers and CDs or check cards works according to this principle with this device. On the left, the situation of paper shredding is shown symbolically. With these directions of rotation, it is not possible to shred paper CDs and credit cards at the same time. If CDs or credit cards are to be shredded, the direction of rotation of the motor must be changed. With a changed direction of rotation, it looks better with the CDs and credit cards. Conversely, of course, shredding paper on the left side no longer works. Okay, got everything. Then put the lower casing back, screwed it on and back to the test run. Plug in, switch on, and first press the clear button. Okay, it runs. Because the shift lever has been thickened, it now triggers the microswitch earlier. A soft touch on the paper should be enough to get the shredder running again. Let's see if it does too. Number 1. I put a small, narrow sheet of paper into the side of the slot. Doesn't work because the contact wasn't triggered. I need to help with the clear button. Example number 2. I put a small narrow sheet of paper in the center of the slot. The shredder starts immediately. I don't need the clear button. Example number 3. I use an A4 paper sheet with a gap. Anyone who has understood the interaction of the shift lever and micro switch can imagine what happens now. When the gap comes, the shredder stops and I have to support with the clear button. And because it was so nice, once more. According to the manufacturer, the shredder should make a max of 7 paper sheets. I number 7 sheets like index cards and put them next to each other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I then put these 3 stacks one after the other into the slot of the shredder. Let the shredder should prove what it can do. Well, it's struggling a lot, but the shredder done it. Congratulations. I sacrifice a CD for demonstration purposes and test what the shredder does with the disk. As already mentioned in this video, it should be noted that the slot must be free of paper scraps residue. In the following that happens when the slot is not clear and the basket isn't empty. The scraps of paper in the basket act like a spring and press the incoming ones into the cutting rollers. If the slide switch is now set to CD, the cutting rollers pull the scraps of paper into the shredder. The result can be complete blockage of the shifter. Either it no longer switches on, or the shredder runs constantly. Now the rubbish has to be removed from the slot. In the worst case, this means a renewed dismantling. However, I find that the basket fills up very quickly. To avoid paper jams, the shredder slot must be clear, and the basket emptied if necessary. Otherwise, the shredder is out of service again. If you have stacks of large amounts of paper to shred, it's better to work without the basket. In the following examples, there should be enough space for the scraps of paper. It works for example in a bathtub. Please drain the water beforehand. If there are no wooden slats, 2 broomsticks are enough. The slot on the underside must always remain free. Or you use the distance between two chairs. 2 banana boxes are okay also. Here is a representation with a fictitious distance box. It is also possible to position the shredder a little lower. Beverage crates are very well suited to create enough space under the shredder. The more paper to be shredded, the higher the shredder has to be positioned. That means stacking beverage crates. It's of course possible to change the supplier of the beverage crates. Sometimes the currently shown one, or this one here, or another variety from the same supplier. For me, the alternative with the beverage crates is the imperial solution. Whenever you feel like it, you can take a little break for a drink. Conclusion. The shredder is currently being offered as new for around 30 to 40 euro. It's a bit noisy, but does what it's supposed to do for occasional home use. If used for a long period, the shredder gets too warm. This triggers the thermal switch. The basket has a small volume. I presented a few different methods in this video for larger amounts of paper. A shortcoming is the paper jam because of the adhesive grease. The other shortcoming is the attachment and sensitivity of the micro switch. Theme blocking. If you can disassemble, clean and reassemble the shredder, you have good chance of winning. If you have 2 thumbs and don't know much about technology, you should better not open the casing. I have no regrets about buying the shredder. For a 3-year-old device and 12 euros, excluding postage, I would buy it again. For a new device, I would prefer a shredder with a particle cut. So that's it from me, and the shredder. See you soon, cheers, and goodbye.